As a producer, how many times have you been told you have a story to share? Go share it, but are left wondering exactly what that story is, exactly how to go about sharing it, and if it's even worth your time? Do we have an answer for you?
Elevate Ag is an online course and community where farmers, ranchers, and other producers can come together to access the tools and information they need to craft, share, and monetize their own personal ag story.
Our online course is unlike any out there. Sharing about agriculture has its unique challenges and opportunities, and until now, no course was addressing them. Elevate Ag was created by us, a rancher and a dairy farmer, specifically for you, our agriculture community.
Save time, frustration, and uncertainty by joining our online course and community. With the tools in this course, you're able to grow your business and monetize. To learn more about our course, visit our website, elevateyouragstory.com. Welcome to Elevate the Podcast, a storytelling and business podcast where we highlight and mastermind entrepreneurs in the agricultural, Western, and rural space.
We're your hosts, Natalie Kovarik
and Tara Vanderdusen.
And today's episode is a mastermind episode where we help an entrepreneur just like you assess, optimize, and strategize their business or brand live on the air.
Created by agriculture for agriculture, we open doors for the rural, Western, and agricultural entrepreneur so they can elevate themselves, their businesses, and the lifestyles that we all love. Today, we are speaking with Dr. Marissa Hake. Dr. Hake is a graduate of Michigan State University, where she received her bachelor's degree in animal science, a doctor in veterinary medicine, and a master's in public health. Her interests include young stock care and handling, on-farm protocol, and culture development and animal welfare. She is passionate about communicating with consumers about modern agriculture through her personal social media accounts at CatVet on Facebook and at CatVet_ on Instagram. She lives in Northwest Ohio with her full-time farming husband, Travis, and their two sons, McCoy and Hayes.
Marissa is what we would call a multi-passionate business owner. She has many interests, and we'd like to say excels at all of them. While this can seem like a good thing, and oftentimes is, sometimes being a multi-passionate business owner can also come with negatives too, like being spread too thin, feeling overwhelmed, and lacking the time needed to attend to all your businesses. Listen to today's mastermind as we deep dive into all these different things with Marissa and brainstorm what we can do to help her feel more in control of all her online ventures.
Marissa, welcome to our show today.
Thank you so much for having me. And that description you just gave, Natalie, is right on, like exactly who I am and what's going on.
Well, we'll dive right in then on that note and see, where would you like to start? Which of your multi-passions would you like us to kind of kickstart with today?
Oh, that's a great question. So should I kind of outline a little bit about kind of what businesses I have going on?
Sure.
Okay. So I guess I have CatVet, which is like kind of my original social media platform. And it really is a jack of all trades. So it is me sharing about my life as a veterinarian and a wife and mother and our beef cow herd and being married to a farmer and like all of the things. So it's production crop ag, it's veterinary medicine, it's, real life, everyday things. And so CatVet was originally started, and that's kind of my main platform. And so what I sell through that is merchandise. So I have some t-shirts and some bags and things like that. And then also that's kind of launched a lot of my speaking opportunities. So I do speaking opportunities, whether it's, and all of those things that I just kind of spoke on. So that's kind of the main one. And then within that, we have Black Label Farms, which we launched in 2020, which was kind of Trav and I's beef cow herd and our British white cows, and kind of marketing that business that we started. So we bought a golf course, and that's where we graze our cows. And we have this kind of opportunity to use the facilities on there for something. So we have a physical facility that we'd like to open up someday. And I would love to put an ag education center in there and grow that. And then we would like to also put an Airbnb on the property, because where we're located, we are really centrally located off of some major US highways and in crossroads and things like that, which is unfortunate most of the time, but fortunate for if you want to open kind of a business. And then on top of all of that, I've just launched what we're calling our virtual rancher experience. So we really wanted to provide an opportunity for kind of 3 different areas. So people who, one, just want to have some behind the scenes information and kind of follow along with their own cow and be able to name the calf and just have all this kind of behind the scenes action when they can share with their family or their kids to make sure that they're getting exposure to agriculture. And then kind of the other thing is it'll also be, for starting out first generation ranchers, a bit of a peer group and a bit of a place where they can go do one-on-ones, ask information, and we'll provide them with all of that information. And that project is a little bit of kind of build the plane as you fly it. So as we're working through that and developing that content, I want to be able to take that content and then move it into the next year or the next year and the next year and keep building that content and having it in an accessible area. And so I guess, there's a lot going on with the programs. And so I'm looking for resources, I guess, to outsource some of that, how to, as I'm building content, repurpose content and build it out for, a program that can happen multiple years without having to recreate all of that content.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great place to start with you right now is actually what can you outsource? Because I'm a big believer in order to make space for new, we have to essentially make space for it, right? So sometimes we have to do less for more. And throughout your whole circulation there of your different business branches, it was just more and more and more, right? And then on top of that, and then on top of that. So because you forgot to mention you also have a full-time job outside of all of this, and you're not currently outsourcing anything, right? You're doing this all by your little old self.
Yes. On top of that, I have a full, very big job that I have lots of things to do for as well. So this is all nights and weekends and, kind of time in between.
And that's a quick path to burnout.
Yeah.
So I don't know how you feel about like a virtual assistant or like outsourcing some of your work, but I think that's something we could deep dive kind of about maybe ways where you could look for one and some things you could hand off to that person. Tara just recently hired a VA and I have a couple different people that help me. So we could spend some time talking about that if you want, Marissa.
Yes, that would be lovely.
Yeah, so I just recently hired a VA. So I have also a couple different people that help me. So the first person I actually hired to help me was a person that helped me with my books. So if you haven't done that, I highly recommend it. Unless you love crunching numbers, hiring someone to help you with just basic, your record keeping and just the account side of things was really helpful for me. It was great to take that off. It was something I didn't like doing anyway. So it was a very easy thing to give up and make room for other things. The second person that I hired, which is somebody that Natalie uses as well, is someone to help us with like our blogs. Do you want to kind of go into that a little bit?
Yeah, I'll actually touch on because I outsource my records too. And I use the same person you do, Mary. And I'll tell you because you have merch and I don't know since you aren't, yours is ran through a company. So it might be a little bit different, but she has helped me tremendously because the ins and outs of which I didn't really realize when I created the merch line, but there are so many expenses. It's so hard to keep track of your actual ins and outs and the amount you're making because you're paying for something that hasn't even sold. And then there's all sorts of charges from like the website you're hosting. And so anyway, she breaks down monthly for me, what I actually paid and what I actually made that month. And that was a huge help, Marissa. So if you feel like the finance part is weighing you down, I know invoices for brand partnerships I was spending way too much time in the inbox with things like that. So even something just as small as that, I think would really free up your time.
Can I ask you guys, so a little bit, how does that work? So, when you said like invoicing, do you send that person kind of all the information and then they contact and do the invoicing, or how does that work for you guys?
Yeah. So Mary, she has access to all my different bank accounts and everything. And then I think it probably just works on a one-to-one of how, maybe you want it. I don't know. She might have some things that are standard across the board, but I kind of I send her invoices. Like once I get one, I just forward them to her and let her know like, hey, this is the invoice I just paid for, February's order or whatever. Or I'll let her know like, hey, January, February, and March, I have these partnerships. It'll be this X amount of money. Can you make sure that they, get invoiced, the 5th of the month or the 10th, like whatever that day is. And so it's just a little bit of communication. It's really quick though. It's honestly saved me so much time.
Yeah, I'll second that. And also, Marissa, being multifaceted, as we keep talking about with you, I actually have her run 2 different businesses for me, the books, and it is great to see the breakdown of each one individually. And so sometimes like there's not really overlap with your businesses. There probably is a little bit more overlap, but having them separated out in the books has been very like clarifying for me of how things are going and what's happening where.
That's a really good point and something that we need to be doing here.
Yeah, she helps Luke with his projections and stuff with Luke for the ranch too. She's really great. Her name's Mary Faber. She's Mary T. Faber Solutions, I think.
We'll put her in the
Instagram,
show notes.
So we'll put her in the show notes for anyone listening. And then obviously we'll connect base with you afterwards, Marissa, because I would highly recommend Mary. She's worth every penny.
Yeah.
Perfect.
On that, then we'll move on to the second person that both Natalie and I use, and she helps us with Pinterest as well as our blog.
Yeah, so that was actually, I outsourced Pinterest before I outsourced my bookkeeping. And Renee actually approached me, which I thought was really great. And for anyone who's listening to this is just the power in taking that first step and putting yourself out there, because I never would have found Renee, and I probably never would have outsourced as quickly had Renee not reached out to me. And so she just sent me a very basic email. She's a Nebraska girl. She's actually not very far from me. Well, she is now, but where she was raised. And so I think just being, geographically close, she was following me online. And she just sent me an email that said like, hey, I know you're growing and I'm starting my own business. She had done, I don't know what kind of media management before for a company, and basically said that she was starting her own line or her own business and was just looking to see if I needed help in basically anything. Like she was very open to being just a virtual assistant. And at that time I said, I'm pretty comfortable running everything I have. I think it's pretty manageable, but I have been thinking about getting on Pinterest. And that was just at a point where I was like, I do not want to sit down and learn the beast of that platform. And so I said, do you specifically have experience in Pinterest? And so that got our conversation going. And I ended up hiring her right away and outsourced. And I have I would say like a decent Pinterest presence, and I don't touch it at all. I don't manage her at all. It's been the biggest blessing. I've just let her free reign. And I think that's a really great tip when you're outsourcing, is if you're going to outsource, like if you're a micro manager, it's probably not going to be the best. You're going to have to learn to like let some things go. Mm-hmm. But it's really been a beautiful blessing. She started with Pinterest and now she kind of does some stuff with my blog because the blog and Pinterest tie so well together.
And I'll touch on that a little bit, the blog, because I think this will be really valuable for you. So what she has done, so I've been blogging for 6 years and I try to post a couple times a month. And so what she actually started was some of my most successful posts from a long time ago. She's updating those blogs, or she's pulling content from Facebook. Say I had a Facebook post that went viral and did really well. She's turning that Facebook post that's my own wording, my own, exactly what I said, and putting it into a blog form, adding photos. So I give her access to all my Google albums that are like photo shoots and different things. And she's able to add those into the blogs. And then she creates the graphics, kind of like what Natalie said, that those graphics then go over to Pinterest really well, or I'll use them to share on Facebook. So she updates old blogs. If I have a brand partnership that's a blog, I'll write it. And then she takes it and does all the SEO, helps me kind of formulate like a title and a headline that's going to do well, along with all the pictures. So that's kind of that repurposing content, like old content. And it's all my own words. So it doesn't feel like I'm giving up creative control, really. It's just repurposing that content.
That is so interesting. So for me, I'm not on the Pinterest world and I don't have a blog. I guess I kind of use Facebook as my blog. And everything I have is very just the thought of the day, right? The picture of the day. I'm doing it right now. I make a post. So I've never been very great at having things timed out and scheduled, which is part of the issue. So now that I'm super busy, I felt like my content's really fallen off. And so I guess I had two questions about that. One is for them to recreate content would be super helpful and or help schedule out. Do they ever say like, okay, you need so many posts a month and you're not there yet? Do they kind of bounce that stuff back to you, or how does that work?
So for the person that helps me with the blog, Renee, we have an agreement that she helps me with 3 blogs a month. So sometimes she'll say like, usually she repurposes 2 old ones, like, or an old blog and an Instagram post or a Facebook post. And then the third one, I try to have like a brand partnership. So if I don't have a brand partnership, she kind of will poke me and be like, hey, we have that one more blog, but that's more because that's how the schedule I have her set up on. But it's a good reminder too, to be like, oh yeah, okay, I can take a minute to write something and put something together for you. And so there's not a lot of pressure. If anything, it takes the pressure off that's just what our schedule is every month.
Yeah, I love that. And I guess my other question too, for me personally, would be SEO. So I have 2 websites. I have my CalfVet website and I have my Black Label Farms website. I run them both off of Squarespace and I do all of that. So are they doing any media, like any website management for you? I guess maybe that's what you guys are considering your blog. And then how are they doing SEO work? Because I think that's one big area that I'm totally missing.
So my third person that's on my team is the VA I just hired. So getting back to her, kind of where this conversation started, when I hired her, the reason I hired her is because she had great background in SEO. And I actually found her on the website called Of the West. And it is a place where you can go and post job listings and they will match you with people that are in agriculture. So she has an ag background, but her specialty is in SEO. And so her very first task was she went through my entire blog and made sure it was for SEO. SEO. So I told her she was really great about getting me focused as well, because I can be really all over the place. And so she was like, what is your main goal from this website? And I said, I would love to book more speaking engagements. That's what I want to do. And so we spent a ton of time going through the SEO for speaking engagements. We looked at like quote unquote competitors. I mean, I don't really see them as that, but just what were other people who are ranking on Google doing when you search agricultural speaker or farmer speaker. And then she went through all the back end of my blog and website. I can't even tell you exactly what she did, because that was exactly why I hired her. I didn't understand that. And now that my website is all SEO optimized and I'm ranking better on Google, now she's going back in my old blogs and search engine optimizing those as well, and just like keeping me on track for ranking on Google for the different things that I want to rank for.
Love that. Yeah. And same, I need the same thing for my Black Label farms. Like I've told my husband like 1,000 times, I'm like, when someone searches British whites, like I want to be the first one that comes up. And so I really want to put some focus on that as well.
And the thing that was like another thing similar to the bookkeeping, like I had no desire to learn SEO and figuring out the back end of my website. I built my website myself. And so I'm sure it was a mess. I can't imagine when she got back there as being like an expert, she probably was like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. But I was like, I don't have the time to go and learn this. And so it was a great thing to like outsource that. Again, like my energy wasn't being well spent there. And so turning it over to someone who's an expert it's just been invaluable.
And Marissa, adding to you had mentioned that you're like, well, I don't really have a blog, like when we were talking about repurposing content, because I know that you create so much content. I don't know where you're at with your email list, but that's another area that person that you're hiring could take. Renee does this for me. So she actually sends out a monthly like newsletter for me that's like a review. So it's like, hey, did you see that we put up this new YouTube video? Did you see that we launched, another this month's apparel line? And she's putting that out for me, and all it is collecting the things I've already done. And I think with your email list would be huge, building out your new virtual ranching experience. And also email list selling for me for apparel has been really huge. I know you mentioned that you feel like you're doing a lot of social selling online, and that kind of like bothers you a little bit. Mm-hmm. If you could move that selling to a very direct, warm audience that is your, an email list built for your apparel line, I think that would take a lot of that off of you, and you'd probably see the better conversion. And that is something that VA that you're outsourcing could do so easily.
So on that note, so my VA also does my weekly newsletter. And so for a newsletter, what I kind of see is 3 newsletters. I would guess like kind of 3 newsletters. One for CAFET selling merchandise, one for Black Label Farms and what you have going on there, and then one for virtual rancher experience. And so you would have those segmented out, and then you could very targeted sell to those people and just keep them up to date, like with information and resources, especially like for Black Label where you want to turn it into a resource center, that would be in your newsletter. And so by breaking it out into an email list like that, you would, as Natalie said, spend less time social selling.
Yeah, that's a really, really great point.
Speaking of the newsletter, so yeah, my girl does a weekly newsletter as well. And one of the things we do is I have a content calendar, which I have never had before either. I post on the daily like you do, just kind of like in the moment and don't have it planned out. So this was a big step for me. But the way we have it broken down is super simple. It's literally the day of the week with the date underneath. And then I have the social channels broken down. So there's TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. And she's in charge of sharing my reels from Instagram to TikTok. And then she's in charge of taking things that are on my blog and putting them on LinkedIn and Facebook, and then doing my newsletter. So if I see a really interesting article that I would love to be shared on my Facebook, I literally just copy it and drop it into there. And I'll say, I'd love it shared on Facebook and LinkedIn. So I'll copy it and paste it into both of those sections. For Instagram, I'm fully in charge of my Instagram. So if there's a post that did really well on Instagram, I'll copy and paste it and put it into the Instagram one as reference for her to be like, this was a good post, like do with it what you can in other places. And so then again, it's just taking something that's already like, I already saw that article or I already wrote that Instagram post, and then she's just putting it in the places I want it placed. And with, cross sharing on multiple platforms, you want to make sure it's in like the right format and the right people are tagged and all those things. And so she can deal with all of that, which has been really helpful for me. We're only like 2.5 weeks into that, and it's already like changed my life. And when we see a post that does well, she'll drop it into my newsletter then too.
Oh my gosh, that sounds beautiful.
It is beautiful. It takes an adjustment and you get used to it. There is an adjustment period of onboarding them, but in the end, like you have to remember, like once you onboard them, it can be so valuable.
And don't be afraid to right now. I've been wanting, my whole goal when I started the blog was actually to have that be able to be outsourced. And but I just didn't know quite yet what I wanted to talk about there and how I wanted to spend my time. So I've been doing it on my own right now, like figuring out like, okay, yes, this is what I want to talk about. These are actually the posts that, I want to put out into the world and stuff. And now that I feel like I'm finally getting a grasp on that, now I'm going to turn it over to Renee. So you don't have to like do it immediately either. It can be like a period where you're like, let me try all this, figure out what I actually want to put on TikTok, like the videos or, you don't have to go like pedal to the metal right away. Like it can be a slower transition too.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I did have another question for you guys. So you guys have the most beautiful pictures and content. And I know that's super valuable, obviously, for social media. You have to have an image that catches their eye and brings them in and wants to read whatever you wrote. So how are you guys managing all of these beautiful pictures and how are you getting them? And tell me more.
It is called a professional photographer. And I have done that from day one. And it's been the best thing. I know that is not an option for everyone, that they don't want to spend the money. But for me, it is not an expense. I consider it an investment in my business, actually. But yeah, it's amazing because I'm never on the search for content. I am not making content up in the moment. I'm not asking my husband to stop working to take a photo of me or to take a photo of him. We usually just have, I found one girl that works really well for me. She's pretty close. And so if I feel like I need to update like ranch lifestyle content, she'll come out and just shoot us for a day doing chores. And we literally just kind of bounce around and we'll just do a variety of the different chores that I know we would feature on my page. Other really amazing thing about it, besides just having content on hand to be like, oh, I know what I want to talk about. Let me just go pull a photo from it instead of having to go create a photo to talk about what I want. I give access to Renee to all the new photo shoots. So she has every single photo to put into the email list. She has all the photos to put onto Pinterest and into the blog. And so it's all just taken care. Like it's been the best thing for me to do that.
And I'll second that. I started from the beginning doing that, and you may have experienced this in the past, but with being environmental consulting, a lot of times my work was actually on other people's farms, and I never didn't feel comfortable pulling out my camera. So then I would find myself with no content from like working. And so that was when I was like, I'm just going to hire a photographer to come out to the farm and like not reenact, but share what I know I'm going to be sharing about. So if I'm going to be sampling wells, that way I just sample the well from my own farm versus like being on a client's farm. And so that was how I started. And the way that I make it work and have kind of continued is I plan for a couple times a year, and it's gotten more frequently lately, but at the beginning it was seriously like 2 or 3 times a year. And I would just plan like 4 or 5 outfits. The girls would be in a couple of them with Daniel. Sometimes it was just me. Sometimes it was just me and Dan. And it would be a crazy afternoon, or that day would just be kind of a crazy day getting content. But then I was done for like months. Now I don't share as much about my kids, so it's easier to just be like, come out, I need some photos, and it's a quicker process. But like Natalie said, it just, where that album is too. It's an entire album filled with content you can use. You can share it with your VA. You can share it with whoever's on your team that needs to see it. And it's just, it's definitely an investment in your business, not an expense.
I love that. I love that recommendation because I think I think that would take a lot off our my plate and also put out, valuable images that are eye-catching. And, sometimes I'm like, I wrote this really great post and then I feel like I flopped on the image because, you know what I mean? And so I think that's really valuable.
Yeah. And I think the photos can be very natural. Like I think Natalie does a great job of this, like your farm chore ones. Like they seem like you just took them in the moment. Like it doesn't have to feel planned and fake or anything like that. It's just what you're doing. You just happen to bring a photographer along.
Yeah. Ours are, we just chore. And I have such a good working relation with Cass that I trust her enough to be like, just follow us, just follow us around. But yeah, I've done that plan, and especially if I know we're going to be out moving cattle in the summer, like in a really pretty pasture or doing something that I know is picturesque. Like I had a girl, a different one follow us. She just rode a 4-wheeler and she just came along while we moved cattle through like 5 pastures. And now I just have content, so much content to work from. And, I shot some of them for brand partnerships in mind, but I have used those photos for so many other things that have popped up since that I'm like, I am so happy that I had those photos on hand.
And having a good photographer goes a really long way. Like my photographer, I have a couple that I work with. They're so great about being like, you know what, I'm going to grab some of the cows. Or recently they were like, I'm going to grab some headshots of Daniel. And I never would have thought to have headshots of Daniel. And then we both ended up at a speaking engagement where we were both speaking. And I was like, I'm so glad the photographer was like, let me get this headshot of Dan. Even though I was like, we'll probably never use that. They think a little bit outside the box. When you find the right one, they really help add to the value of it.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that's what I need to do is actually find someone in my area for sure.
That's how I found Cass. I researched. So I was using a different photographer that lived close to me, and then she ended up moving, and I had a brand partnership that I had to shoot. And I was like, shoot, I have got to find someone. So I literally picked the 2 closest towns to us that were bigger, and I did hashtag Carney photographers and hashtag Grand Island photographers. And that is how I found Cass. So do not be afraid to even just start there simply. I mean, obviously you could like go to, Google and stuff like that, but and Cass has been the most amazing person. And I just found her from a hashtag on Instagram.
I literally thought you meant like Carney, like Carnival Photographer.
Oh,
I was like,
amazing.
Okay.
I don't recommend that, but
I mean, that will provide some quality content for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that is our lives anyway. But
Yeah, you're like, it's actually very fitting for the circus we have going on.
Well, is there any final questions you have for us?
No, you know what? I think my last one is going back to the email list. Have you guys found that to be really valuable? I think that's one thing I started doing with my website is collecting emails. And then again, it came back to time and resources. And I was like, I don't know what to do with these emails. So, I mean, do you guys consider that like a super value add, so like a must have?
Yes. I'm like throwing all my focus into my email list and my weekly newsletter is I really, not that I want to take a step back from social, just as social is crazy and we all know it and it has ups and downs. I've been putting a lot of my energy into email list and then really providing value in my newsletter.
I mean, if you're looking at email lists from a business standpoint, they have a much higher conversion rate than social selling. So the amount of like percentage, if you're going to put like, hey, I, did a new t-shirt and you put that out onto Instagram or Facebook, the amount of people that are actually going to buy from that is way lower than that would buy from it from your email list. So the same as Tara, I feel like I don't feel like I was behind on my email list. I feel like if I had started my email list any sooner, I wouldn't have been able to provide actually high quality content to it. So I'm glad I didn't start any sooner, but I'm also really glad I didn't wait just for the benefit I'm seeing from it. I feel like I kind of got to a point where I was like, okay, I feel like I can pay attention to my email list. It's time to start it. So it's been the best thing, like getting people onto your email list.
And we talked about the segments, but I really think this is where it serves your business, especially since you have such diverse things. Like the person that's interested in your virtual ranching may not be interested in buying a t-shirt. And so being able to sign up for CAFET's t-shirts and Black Label's resources, that would, in my mind, is kind of 2 different audiences. And so being able to really like have a warm audience. So if you have an email list for your merchandise at CAFET, those people have said, I am really interested in your merchandise. And so then you're sending them an email with that information that says, hey, I have a new t-shirt. That's like the perfect audience for, selling that merchandise too.
Okay. And so I do have one last question for your brilliant minds. So as I'm building out my Black Label Farms, the virtual rancher experience, so our thoughts is kind of having a group where we're going live, we're having these discussions. Could a VA be the person that comes in after those segments, uses those recordings to then build out like modules on a website that we could reference later? Is that something that, you could use those for?
Yes, but I would look in their resume then for video editing and video production. Like that would be one of my requirements beyond so for me, I said I was focused on newsletter and SEO. And so I found someone really strong with that background. And so for you, I would look for someone that's SEO, but also then video editing, maybe even some background in maybe like creating online courses or something where they're really putting content into like a package deal.
Well, and even agriculture, which goes kind of without saying itself, but I feel like that was one of the things I struggled with like outsourcing at first, because I was like, how is this person going to talk about calving season? The things that I want to talk about, because ours is pretty heavy in like actual production ag. And so I was like, how are they going to write about this if they don't even understand it? And that is like one of the things that are the favorite thing about my 3 people is like Mary is from a dairy farm. So, when she looks at our finances for the ranch or what I have going on, like it's not confusing to her. She understands, agriculture finances. Renee grew up in rural Nebraska too. And so she understands like when she's writing out my blog posts and stuff, putting stuff on Pinterest, like she's familiar with agriculture and like maybe images you should show or shouldn't show. And the same thing for my graphic designer. Like I didn't hire someone that if I was like, hey, I need a label of a bull, it was going to draw something that like wasn't realistic to an actual animal. And so I feel like that's the other thing. And I think that's why the Westco website is so such a great source for us to probably start at. I mean, you could go into like maybe agriculture Facebook groups or like look at LinkedIn for people that had agriculture backgrounds too. But of the Westco is really like tailored to people in the agriculture and Western industry. And I think that's like a huge portion to when we are in like ag social media is having those people that are VAs that we're outsourcing to that understand the industry that we're in.
And I'll second that and even add my photographer I use the most often has a background in rodeo, horses. She's does a lot of photography at rodeos. And so she's like really familiar with animals. So like getting in the pen with dairy cows doesn't bother her. Like they're just having someone that understands ag goes a really long way in all facets of who you're outsourcing work to.
Awesome. That's super helpful. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. This was so fun being able to deep dive this all with you. We really appreciate you taking the time to share your business with our audience. So thank you.
No problem. Again, thank you guys for being a brain trust and providing this opportunity for other people that are growing their businesses. So it's such a great resource.
We really love these coaching conversations. We truly believe that we have so much to learn from one another because while our businesses may be different, what we as entrepreneurs experience as leaders of our business are infinitely similar in nature.
At the end of every episode, Tara and I like to summarize the discussion and advice given during that episode into a few main takeaways that you can implement to strengthen and grow your own brand or business. This week, it was all about outsourcing. As a multi-passionate entrepreneur, know that it's okay to have many businesses, but in order to scale them all while keeping your sanity, we'd recommend outsourcing any of those small, repeatable tasks you find yourself dreading so that you can instead put your time and energy into what you do best, which is creating and growing your business.
Thanks again to Dr. Hake for coming on the podcast today. If you are interested in submitting yourself to be mentored on the podcast like Marissa was, please go to elevateyouragstory.com/podcast and fill out the form to submit yourself. We'd love to have you on air with us.
And don't forget, we'd love connecting with you. Subscribe to our podcast and leave us a review to help more rural business entrepreneurs find our podcast. Who knows, we may just share your review online. Thanks again for listening and see you next time.